Okay. The national debt, $16.2 trillion and rising fast. We know this is a major issue for many of our viewers, maybe the biggest issue for you. We are spending money now, saddling future generations with this massive debt that really you're not going to be able to repay. Here's what union leader Richard Trumka said about the national debt. He says the national debt is not a short-term crisis. All right, this is what President Obama said on David Letterman back in September. We don't have to be worried about it short term. Both of them talking about debt. Are they right? Don't we have to worry? Joining us is Mattie Duppler from Americans for Tax Reform. You know, Mattie, I could say the President and Richard Trumka, they got a point. I mean, we're not going to have a debt crisis. No, seriously, we're not going to have a debt crisis next week or next month, maybe not even next year. It's very cheap to keep borrowing money. Interest rates are at all-time record lows. So why worry about it? Tell me, why should I worry about it?
Well, the President and Trumka are right in one sense, and that's that we have these massive drivers of debt that we're not addressing. We're not looking at Medicare. We're not looking at Social Security. And these are the things that ultimately are going to bankrupt the country. The thing that makes me concerned hearing this from, left-wing leaders, hearing this from the President, is that to say that we don't need to deal with the problem now is to ignore the massive spending that Obama has presided over. And for him to try and ignore that presents a problem for us now. We're not, like you said, interest rates are low, but in no way are we in an economy that's not beleaguered by a big government, and the uncertainty with tax hikes just adds to that.
Yeah, as I listen to these negotiations that's going on over this fiscal cliff, I hear Richard Trumka really loud and clear saying, look, borrow. Keep borrowing. You must not cut spending on Medicare, Medicaid, as you mentioned. You can't do that. You can tax the rich. We can pay for it by taxing the rich. But you got to keep on spending, and we don't care about the debt. I think we're on the same lines here. I think that's really, really dangerous. Go.
I agree with you entirely. And look back last year during the President's Fiscal Commission, you had the famed Simpson-Bowles plan emerge from that. Trumka was the one who voted against it. He said that it did too much, it cut too much from these entitlement programs. It did too much to cut back on government spending. And as a leader of the labor movement, he doesn't want to see his projects cut back. He doesn't want to see federal stimulus spending to stop.
What he wants is a big new infrastructure stimulus program. That's exactly what he's called for. Okay.
And you had Democrats. Sorry, go ahead, Stuart.
Hold on a second, because I've got a lot of red ink news items. Just hold on. I'm going to get your comment in a second. Okay, red ink item number 1. The Federal Housing Administration, FHA, it posts a deficit of $13.5 billion. It may require a bailout. $13.5 billion. Item 2. Did you think that the $5 billion loss from the Postal Service last year was big? This year, it lost almost $16 billion. $16 billion. Raising stamps a penny will not fix that. All right, Mattie, come on back in. 2 red ink items. I suspect that there will be bailouts. $13.5 billion FHA, $16 billion Postal Service. That's a bailout. That's government spending.
Well, FHA is really hardly a surprise given that President Obama, when he first came into office, promised all of these recovery measures to get the housing market back on track. And he hardly spent, for all the spending he did, he hardly spent a penny out of a lot of those programs. So the fact that FHA is now having problems is not really a surprise. In terms of the Postal Office, we've had a lot of these problems, for years, and we've seen the writing on the wall, but we refuse to confront these costs. And this is another good example where we have a lot of labor problems standing in the way. 80% of the post office costs come from its labor agreements and come from the burden they have to take on for their workers, and the fact that they're unwilling to make concessions on any of these union contracts that are just crushing the entire program.
You're right. I think a lot of our viewers are saying $16 billion to the Postal Service. That's peanuts. I mean, seriously, we are borrowing an extra $3.5 billion every single day. So what if we keep the Postal Service going with a $16 billion bailout? I mean, that's the inclination, is it? Because you can't wrap your arms around these massive numbers. Can't get to grips with them.
Right. The thing that viewers need to take away is that this is endemic. This is not just, one example that is a problem that we're pushing by the wayside. As you mentioned, we've got FHA, you've got Post Office. This could be said for a majority of what's happening at the federal level. We have unfeasible, untenable programs that can stand on their own 2 feet, but refuse to allow the private market to take over. And the Post Office is just a perfect example of that.
We will have to wait for another day, Mattie, but I'll have to pose this question. Can any politician get elected, or certainly re-elected, if they say, I'm going to cut this, cut that, I'm going to cut the services which you like? Can you get re-elected?
Well, look what happened last week, Stuart. We have a House of Representatives that pledged to do just that, cut federal spending, but save these entitlement programs. That's the big difference between Republicans and Democrats right now, is that Republicans have a plan, in the Paul Ryan plan, to save these mandatory spending programs, whereas Democrats are on the road to bankrupt them.
All right, we listen to you.